From 1765 to 1776, King George of England levied several different types of taxes against the American colonies. The first one we will cover is the Stamp Act of 1765. The Stamp Act was a tax imposed on all paper documents in the colonies. This tax was imposed because England was looking for revenue to pay back war debts from the 7 Years' War that they had with France. Colonists argued that they could not be taxed by anyone other than their local assemblies, and that this tax was unconstitutional. This teapot here is an example of propaganda used by the opponents of the Stamp Act to get their message across to their fellow colonists. Benjamin Franklin even went to England to argue in front of Parliament on behalf of the colonies that they could not be taxed without representation. Benjamin Franklin was successful in getting the Stamp Act repealed. However, England then turned around and passed the Declaratory Act. The Declaratory Act stated that Parliament could pass any legislation it wanted against the colonies, even without colonial approval. This was the first of many strains in the relationship between Parliament and the colonies. The next event we will cover is the Boston Massacre of 1770. The print shown here was printed by Paul Revere following the massacre. Its intention was to be propaganda to rally other colonists and other Bostonians to his cause against the British. On March 5, 1770, a fight occurred between colonial protesters and a small squad of British soldiers. After being pelted by sticks, rocks, and snowballs, the Redcoats opened fire on the colonists. This resulted in the death of 5 Bostonians named Samuel Gray, James Caldwell, Samuel Maverick, Patrick Carr, and Crispus Attucks. Attucks would be the first African American killed in the Revolution. When the case finally went to trial the following November, the soldiers were defended by none other than future President John Adams. Adams faced lots of pushback for taking this case, mainly from his cousin Samuel and the other Sons of Liberty, as they felt he should be backing the colonial cause and not defending the British enemy. Adams was able to successfully argue that the soldiers were provoked by the colonists, and it was in their reaction that they opened fire. 6 of the 8 soldiers were found innocent, while 2 were found guilty of manslaughter. By being found guilty of only manslaughter and not murder, their punishment was only to have their thumbs branded, which is better than the alternative, which would have been death by hanging as punishment for murder. The next 2 acts we will cover are the Tea Act and the Boston Tea Party, both occurring in 1773. The Tea Act was passed by the British Parliament as a way to increase profits for the struggling British East India Company. This act gave the British East India Company a monopoly by not allowing any other tea to be sold in any British colony. While most of the American colonies begrudgingly accepted the Tea Act, this was not the case in Massachusetts, especially in Boston. They saw this as the king and Parliament overreaching and overstepping into their lives, which is why on December 16, 1773, the Sons of Liberty disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians and snuck onto 3 British ships docked in Boston Harbor. While on the ships, they destroyed over 92,000 pounds of tea by throwing it into the harbor. This cost the British East India Company 9,659 pounds, or $1.7 million in today's money. This act by the Sons of Liberty would not go unpunished by Parliament. Next, we will cover the Intolerable Acts of 1774. The first of the Intolerable Acts was the Boston Port Bill. This closed Boston Harbor until the city paid back in full all of the money for the tea that was damaged as a result of the Boston Tea Party. Next was the Massachusetts Government Act. This act voided the Massachusetts Charter of 1691, reducing Massachusetts to the level of Crown Colony. This also instituted a military government under the watch of General Thomas Gage, who outlawed any public meetings that did not have prior approval. Next was the Administration of Justice Act. This protected British officials charged with crimes by allowing them to return to England or to a more friendly colony for their trial. Finally was the Quartering Act. This required colonists in every colony to provide the British soldiers with food, drink, and quarters. This not only included public buildings, but private dwellings as well. The final thing we will cover is the Second Continental Congress and signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. The Second Continental Congress first met May 10, 1775 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. From there, they managed the war effort and appointed General George Washington to be commander-in-chief. The Congress eventually moved toward outright independence from England and commissioned Congressmember Thomas Jefferson to write the Declaration of Independence. It was on July 2nd, 1776 that Congress voted to declare independence from England. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed by the 56 members of the Continental Congress, finally declaring America free of imperial power and its own independent nation.